At exactly 6 every morning, a quiet man named Daniel Carter walked through the back entrance of Mercy Hills Hospital wearing a faded blue janitor uniform. He pushed an old cleaning cart, kept his head down, and rarely spoke more than necessary. To most employees, Daniel was invisible. Doctors walked past him without saying hello. Nurses complained when he cleaned their stations, and some young residents laughed whenever they saw him struggling with a heavy trash bag. Nobody knew that Daniel had a reason for choosing that uniform. 3 months earlier, he had secretly purchased Mercy Hills Hospital after its previous owners nearly drove it into bankruptcy. But instead of announcing himself as the new owner, Daniel decided to work inside the hospital as a janitor. He wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. On his first week, he noticed something disturbing. Patients were being ignored, nurses were exhausted, and some senior doctors treated lower-paid workers as if they were worthless. Daniel especially noticed Dr. Richard Blake, the hospital's most respected surgeon. Richard was brilliant, wealthy, and arrogant. He often humiliated nurses and assistants in front of patients. One morning, Daniel was cleaning the hallway outside the emergency room when Richard stepped over his mop without even looking at him. "Move that thing," Richard snapped. Daniel quietly moved the mop. A group of residents nearby laughed. "Careful, doctor," one joked. "You might catch a disease from the janitor." Richard smirked. "Some people belong on the floor." Daniel heard every word, but said nothing. Later that afternoon, Daniel saw an elderly patient sitting alone in a wheelchair. Her name was Mrs. Thompson, and she had been waiting nearly an hour for someone to bring her medication. Daniel immediately went to the nurse's station and asked about it. A tired nurse checked the records and discovered that the prescription had been misplaced. Daniel personally found the medication and delivered it to the woman. "Thank you," Mrs. Thompson whispered. "You're very kind." Daniel smiled. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Unfortunately, one of the senior administrators, Victor Grant, overheard him. Victor had always considered janitors unimportant. "Don't interfere with medical staff," he warned. "You're here to clean, not think." Daniel calmly replied, "Sometimes helping someone is more important than following a job description." Victor laughed. "You really don't know your place." Daniel simply walked away. Over the next few weeks, strange things began happening. Daniel noticed supplies disappearing from storage rooms. Certain patients were being charged for services they never received. He also discovered that several workers had complained about unsafe conditions, but were afraid to speak openly because Victor threatened to fire them. Daniel began documenting everything. One evening, he found a young nurse named Emily crying in an empty hallway. "Are you okay?" he asked. Emily wiped her tears. "Dr. Blake blamed me for a mistake he made. I'm afraid I'll lose my job." Daniel looked at her carefully. "Did you make the mistake?" She shook her head. "No." "Then don't accept blame for something you didn't do." Emily looked surprised. "Why do you care?" Daniel smiled. "Because I know what it's like to be judged before anyone knows your story." The following Monday, the hospital received an unexpected announcement. The board had scheduled an emergency meeting because the hospital's new owner was coming to inspect the facility. Everyone was nervous. Victor ordered employees to make the hospital look perfect. Doctors were told to behave professionally. Nurses were instructed to remain at their stations, and janitors were ordered to stay out of sight. Daniel listened quietly. Then Victor looked directly at him. "You especially. Stay in the basement during the inspection. We don't need the owner seeing someone like you." Daniel nodded. Of course. But he didn't go to the basement. At 10 a.m., the board members entered the main lobby. Behind them came several lawyers and financial advisors. Everyone stood straight. Richard adjusted his expensive coat and smiled confidently. Victor walked forward to greet the visitors. "Welcome to Mercy Hills. We are honored to have you here." One of the lawyers looked around. "Where is Mr. Carter?" Victor answered. "He should be arriving shortly." Then the elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped out wearing the same faded janitor uniform. Several employees laughed. Richard whispered, "What is he doing here?" Daniel walked straight toward the board. Victor tried to stop him. "You were told to stay downstairs." Daniel ignored him. One of the lawyers smiled and said, "Good morning, Mr. Carter." The entire lobby became silent. Victor froze. Richard's face went pale. Emily stared at Daniel in disbelief. "Mr. Carter?" she whispered. The lawyer continued. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Daniel Carter, the founder and majority owner of Mercy Hills Medical Group." Nobody moved. Daniel looked around the room. "Yes, I'm the janitor you've all been ignoring." Richard's mouth dropped open. Victor looked as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. Daniel continued. "I bought this hospital 3 months ago because I believed it could become one of the best medical centers in the region. But I didn't want reports written by executives. I wanted to see how patients and employees were actually treated." He turned toward Victor. "And what I discovered was worse than I expected." The lawyer opened a folder containing financial records, patient complaints, security footage, and employee statements. Victor had been secretly overcharging patients and diverting hospital funds. Richard had repeatedly blamed nurses for his own mistakes. Several employees had evidence against him. Daniel looked at Richard. "Talent doesn't give anyone permission to humiliate others." Richard lowered his head. "Mr. Carter, I didn't know," Daniel interrupted. "That's exactly the problem. You didn't know because you never bothered to see the people beneath you." He then turned toward Emily and the other nurses. "Starting today, every employee complaint will be investigated independently. Wages for the lowest-paid workers will increase, unsafe conditions will be fixed, and patient care will come before profit." The room erupted in applause. Some employees cried. Mrs. Thompson, watching from her wheelchair, smiled proudly. Daniel walked over to her and gently shook her hand. "Thank you for reminding me why I came here." She smiled. "I always knew there was something special about you." A few days later, Victor was dismissed and faced an investigation. Richard was suspended pending review of his conduct. The hospital also introduced new policies designed to protect patients and staff. Daniel continued visiting the hospital, but he no longer wore the janitor uniform every day. Yet whenever he saw a cleaner pushing a cart through the hallway, he stopped to greet them. One morning, Emily asked him. Daniel looked down the busy hallway and smiled. "Because a title can tell you what someone does. It doesn't tell you who they are." Emily nodded. Daniel continued. "The greatest mistake people make is judging someone's worth by their uniform, salary, or position. Sometimes the person everyone ignores is the person with the power to change everything." From that day forward, Mercy Hills became known not only for excellent medical care, but also for treating every worker with respect. And whenever someone new joined the hospital, the employees told them the story of the mysterious janitor who had walked through those halls unnoticed, until the day everyone discovered that the quiet man pushing a cleaning cart wasn't beneath them at all. He was the man who owned the entire hospital,